Welcome back to Captain Squishface's Chicken Nugget Reviews, where we're doing War Thunder and we're talking about chicken nuggets because Wendy's came out with some new chicken nuggets where they put sauces on them. And obviously, the first thing I did was I went down and I tried out one of them because I was really interested in the ghost pepper sauce. Because the ghost pepper sauce, like I like hot things. Hot things are pretty uh, dang good. And I thought that, hey, going down and getting like $7 chicken nuggies with some super hot ghost pepper sauce, it might be interesting. And um, it was okay. Like Wendy's chicken nuggets they're good. Like the nugget part is fine. I would rate them as good as McDonald's chicken nuggets, but different because when you get McDonald's chicken nuggets, you want the chemicals, you want the synthetic mystery meat flavor with all that buttery goodness, and then when you go to Wendy's, you want something that's like also just as crap, but might have came all from the same animal, so it's fine. But long story short, the ghost pepper sauce tasted very orange. Like it tasted the color. It wasn't very hot. It was very, very white people spicy. And I wasn't disappointed, but I also wasn't impressed. Like I'm not gonna go back for like I got to get the ghost pepper sauce for the Wendy's thing because they tasted orange. And speaking of things that look the way that they are and behave the way that you would expect them to at this point, we're talking about the SU-27 SM. You can't tell that because you're seeing background footage of missile play testing, but I assure you, we are going to be talking about the SU-27 SM. So before I talk about the SU-27 SM, I have to talk about the missiles because that's probably the thing that you're most interested in, the bottom line up front. And the bottom line up front is the R77 with the new buffs is better than it was before. The AIM 120 is also better at the thing that it's supposed to be good at, which is long range combat. It is more effective at longer distances. And the net change is basically the 120 is still kind of the missile to have if you want to do BVR things. The 77 is just a lot less bad at doing what I call counter firing. So if you're at low altitude, the guy is close. There is a longer range where he can't completely ignore your missile. Going up to altitude in the 27 is still, it's not going to be viable. There are so many things that I have to talk about, and I have to try to do it in sequence to do it in a way that makes sense. But the bottom line is the 77 is not good. And here's a perfect example of that. We got a muted clip. We got Devis on the enemy team, and we're only doing like a 60-degree crank. This is 60 degrees after we shot our missiles. And if you look at mine, there's a point that it's just going to go, I don't feel like it anymore. I don't think I'm going to do anything. I'm just going to go off to space. And if you look at the previous footage, that's one of the things that also kind of happened. The 77, because of the way that it is just easier to notch. And with the 27, every time they do a patch, every time they do something, they fuck something up. And they did a thing with the Erst where, like, the thing wants to lock the ground or the sky now. Or it's just like, if you look at this, it's playing Tetris with me. It's like, it's literally Tetris. Like, what the fuck is this shit? What the fuck is up with this? Like, I don't even know what this glitch is. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, this is just a random game that I had today, the day that I'm recording the video, which is basically a month after the first game I had in it, which is what I'm showcasing clips here, because the way that I approach Sim is, yes, I cherry pick the games. I show you kind of like the best of the bunch for the most part, but I also try to like splice in like things that are bad, and I try to stick around for things that are bad because I think that if you look at the average War Thunder player experience, like everyone's around average, below average, or above average. And if you're playing Sim, if you don't stick around for the below average games, you could really, really skew your perception and say literally every single plane is good. If I go and play 5 games and 2 of them I do really well and 3 of them I do like abysmally bad at the start and then I leave them very quickly, that experience doesn't like set in with me. and it means that I can give you a skewed perception. This is like one of the gripes I have with like War Thunder content in general is like you can get a skewed perception. Like right there, I launched a 27 ET at what I thought was a plane on the radar, and it just flies straight and explodes. Now, maybe it exploded into like a dead enemy missile, but I'm like, what? What the fuck? What is up with that? I don't know. And with the 27, with the radar, with the way that it works, it doesn't. It does not really work at all. This is a plane that no matter how much you play it, no matter how hard you try, if you try to use the sensors on it and you try to use them to the best of their ability, you're fucking yourself. Like, you are going to be struggling against this thing. It's going to fool you every once in a while, because you will get good games in it, because that's the way things work. That's the way things work in Sim. There are ways to use this plane that are still effective, but they're not really the doing of the plane itself. It's really the doing of the fact that you know the spots on the map to ambush players from. You know that you can go to low altitude. You can hug the deck harder than you've ever hugged it before, because you take this plane to altitude, and if it's not the first week of a new patch, it's fucking useless. If the enemy player is competent, going to altitude in this thing is basically it's basically pointless. There are no real tricks you can do outside of like 1 to 2 things. You can technically, in theory, you can go up and you go to 9,000 meters, you launch an R27ER, you unlock it, you go cold to sit out of the range of the 120, and then you turn back in within your 20 seconds, you relock, and maybe you guide it in. This is a trick that I used on Butters and like a BBR duel, and it worked literally once. It worked once because as soon as it happened, he's like, I saw what you did. I can counter that. Watch this. And then lost every single time after that, at least in the BVR realm. The only other thing that you can do with this plane is third-party people, hit people that are unaware. You have to be like an ambush player. You have to ambush people. If you get into a dogfight with this plane, it's hopeless in theory, in practice, because you're fighting people that have never merged, and a lot of people that are brand new. Like, you'll do fine, but the fact that you have to get into like a bad situation to do well is not good. The plane is literally not good. And the first game that I am showing is one of the first games that I played in it, because if you pay attention to the background footage, which I don't expect people to pay attention to the background footage, so I have to explain it. That's what the commentary is for. Me and Nimble Target are in the same game, and if you pay attention to the scoreboard, there's a point he's gone with like a +1 KD ratio, because he's like, hey, this shit sucks. It's enough red team suffering for the day. I'm gonna go play something else, this is a natural reaction to actually trying to play this thing, because it's abysmal. It's not good. You're going to be fighting against this thing all of the time. In a lot of ways, it's not worse than the F4 F-Ice, strictly speaking. Like, capability-wise, it's better. Overall, statistics-wise, probably better. The thing is, this plane is a continuous disappointment in comparison to that. Because like, you fly the F4 F-Ice, and you're like, yeah, this plane's like, it's an F4 airframe with good radar, good missiles, bad everything else, and it literally meets the expectations. This thing cannot set expectations. It can't live up to expectations, and if you have any expectations outside of flying it like an F5C or an F5E with like the radar off and just completely ambushing people, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be fun. It's going to be incredibly frustrating. You're going to realize that your team evaporates unless you pick your lobbies. If you're smart, you look at the player list, you look for players that you know are good, that are experienced, that basically you're looking for people that have a cult following of playing on red side or like shitting on US players out of spite, because that is literally what is keeping the red team community going. If you get a game and you've got Alex137 Rizit on the team, and you got Simply Sinful on the team, and you have like experienced sim players on the team, like, yeah, the game will probably go okay, but it is not because of the capabilities of the plane. So what makes this plane's capabilities so much worse? What makes the sum of the parts worse than the whole? Well, number one, let's start with the radar. The radar is very, 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 very bad. I don't know if it's badly modeled per se, but the actual practical experience with the radar is absolutely, positively one of the worst gameplay experiences that I have ever had. And every time they update the game, it gets a little bit worse. So one of the things that they did to the radar is they made it so that the search pattern, it repeats the very top of the search pattern, and it repeats the very bottom of the search pattern. And if you have the radar slewed to the horizon, it means it's scanning very low and very high multiple times, but it means that everything in the middle is very slow. It means that the time that it takes for targets to populate on trackball scan head-on is very, very long. It is somewhere in the range of 7 to 14 seconds, but I've also had instances where I've been looking at targets like dead ahead of me, knowing their altitude, knowing their heading, and they just do not populate at all. If you pay attention to some of the gameplay footage that I have in the background of like the R77 and launching it, I'm launching it what is at effectively like ghost targets, where the cursor will pick up the target before it renders on the radar screen. Like, I don't have like a distance and like direction it's traveling or kind of any kind of identification going on. I'm just kind of like looking at the cursor going, well, it's stuck, I'm gonna send it, because I don't know if it's an enemy. I don't know if it's coming at me or going away, but it seems like it's coming at me. I gotta like interpolate like what the cursor is doing to be able to make any kind of guesstimation. And this isn't a problem that's unique to the Su-27 radar right now. It's also something that affects pretty much every other radar. But on the Su-27 radar, a radar that populates targets abysmally slowly. Like, this thing is a fucking fax machine. It is faxing the coordinates to you. It's not even faxing coordinates to you. It's faxing them in a formula that you have to do on your hands to figure out where the hell they're at. Like, it sucks. It's terrible. It's garbage. Like, the radar is bad. Like, the way that you have to use this plane and maximize its use is basically using the radar as a, like, third source of information. Like, you're almost better off completely ignoring it. Like using IRST, which is also, by the way, bugged as shit. Not only did it play Tetris with me in the beginning, if you angle it up and down at all, it points at the dirt, or it points at like 90 degrees up in the sky. Now, by the time I get this video out, it'll probably be fixed. I've been told it's going to be fixed. But right now, it's bad. It sucks. It means that you're going to spend a lot of time in this plane fidgeting with things that should probably at this point, like, just work. Or at least, like, work according to, like, you know, historical precedent. Maybe in real life the plane's radar was even more unusable than this, but I find that hard to believe. And the thing is, if it was this bad or worse, like, they should have just added a better version of this plane. They shouldn't have added the, like, late 1990s version. Like, just add the SM-3. It's got 10% more thrust and it has a better radar. And a plane having the better radar but the worst long-range missile, like, that would be fine from a balancing perspective. The problem with the Soviet tech tree is, like, you get a choice of one or the other. You either get a good radar in the SMT and no flight performance to back it up, or you get flight performance and no radar. And then you get IRST, which is going to be somehow bugged like 34 ways to Sunday. Like, I guarantee you they're going to fix it, and they're somehow going to mess it up somehow. Like, I don't know how. My outlook for this plane has been, like, it's honestly, like, this is a plane for masochists. Like, if you are a masochist, if you want to hate yourself, if you want to hate the game, play this plane for a month. It will burn you out. Like, it sucks. Like, look at this. Like, look at the radar. Look at the radar that I just had. Go back. Go rewind. Look at what I was looking at. It just had a cursor on a target, and like, yeah, it's tracking, but holy hell, like it's not actually tracking. I'm just kind of like putting the cursor on and be like, it's stuck, and then guessing, and like, yeah, it works, but it shouldn't be this way. This is somehow worse than it was before the patch. And yes, you do have the improved RWR sensor. So you have like the ability to determine what is locking you, whether or not it's friendly or enemy. It's not as important now because they changed the RWR stuff that friendlies don't like notify you. So that's good. That means that your bad RWR on the other one is better. But this plane's still like, it's not literally the worst, but it is literally the worst at being good. And that doesn't mean that you're going to do badly in it, because there's ways to cope with the badness. The way that you cope with the badness is you do what I'm doing here. This is literally my last game in the SU-27. I wanted to go out, see if I could do it, see if I change the way that I play the game, and be like, hey, I'm going to play the game where I try to not die, as opposed to get more kills and get people the fuck out of here. Like, hey, I'll just play to not die. And it works, but it literally works to the same extent with every other single top tier. There is nothing special or unique about the way that I'm playing this thing. At the same time, besides the radar, besides the IRST, besides the flight model, besides the missiles, the other thing the plane is not really like great at is, well, the countermeasure count is 120-ish. It might be like 117 or 114 or whatever the fucking Russians use. The random numbers that don't make sense. Overall, with the multipathing changes, with the fact that you should probably use chaff for radar missiles, it means that effectively you have cut your countermeasures in half. It also means that planes like the Gripen do everything better than you except for having 10 missiles versus 6. It also means that when you fight things like the Gripen, they can do the same tactics you do, they can mirror you, they can do everything better, and they have 700 countermeasures, which means, wow, they went down to 350 as opposed to you're effectively down to like 60. It means that planes like the Gripen with incredibly small radar cross sections, like, they kind of win. Like, you still have like basically the periodic flare cheat code of go at low altitude, turn in circles, and be invulnerable. You don't really have that luxury with this thing. Like, you will try to be judicious with your flares and your chaff to defeat one missile, and if you don't thread the needle correctly, you will die. Which is one of the things that I did, but that last death is not because of chaff or anything else that is related to this. It's because I went to a little bit too high of an altitude, and lo and behold, the radar does not add to your situational awareness. If anything, like, it detracts from it because it allures you into the illusion that it might work this time. And I got to a little bit too high altitude, guy pops up a little bit too close, I roll down, I try to get to multipath height, and I overestimate it, I hit the ground. That's part of the game. One of the things that I have seen more often than not against especially good players, people that get good KDs, guys that are good in sim, is they are hitting the ground more often because we are multipathing like harder than ever. Like, we do not want to go to altitude in basically anything that is not an F-16C or an F-15C or like the equivalents in the other tiers. Like AIM, the F-16A, whatever, the Belgian one, it's the same thing for all intents and purposes. Do not want to. And in this plane especially, you need to be out of sight, you need to be out of mind, you need to use your Erst, you need to deck rat harder than ever, because not only is the flight model bad, not only is the radar like one of the, I can't stress how, as someone who, I don't care for BVR, like I wish everything was like, we're just going to gunfight each other all the time. Like, I would like that better, because I'd be better at that. The fact that the plane, the stuff that's in the plane, basically works against you in ways that aren't even present in DCS, means that the plane is like interminably, like, it's it's not just bad, but it's bad in a way that's frustrating. I can't keep, like, I gotta keep going back to that, because, like, F4F Ice is bad. It is bad in a way that is completely understandable, and, like, we all understand why it's bad, because it's an F4F airframe with good missiles, and, like, it was added too late. This plane on the surface seems like it almost has all of the tools to be good, and then just doesn't be good or even comparable to anything else, because everything else can do the same thing you do, except better, with the sole exception, the one thing that I will say that is good about this plane is the missile count, and the fact that it has R-27 ETs, and the fact that it has Erst. Erst is good. The way that Erst works in the cockpit with the way that it populates on the little radio menu on the MFD is pretty good. Like, if they fix it, it could probably be okay to mid-good. I don't think it redeems the plane. I think it makes the plane very, very technical to fly. And I also think it's, like, in a way that most players are not going to duplicate. Even experienced sim players are going to play this out like 2 to 3 times, 5 times in the case of Aero Turtle, and say that the plane's good, and then it basically kind of, like, never touched again. And I'm almost firmly in that boat, but I like to make things work out of spite. I like to suffer because that's what I do. And I also feel that, like, part of, like, War Thunder gameplay for most people is suffering. Like, you can't deny the fact that you've had bad games. You can't deny the fact that negativity is kind of baked into the zero-sum nature of the game. So I try to expose myself to some of that negativity to put myself in other people's shoes. Because this plane, if you play it, if you're on an average player skill level, it's legitimately not fun. It is legitimately not fun to have a guy locked up on radar, to shoot an R-27 ER at him, to crank 60 degrees right, and think you have him, and then just have the radar contact disappear and have the missile trashed. And he did nothing. He didn't chaff. He didn't do anything. I just decided, I'm going to go on a vacation. That's what happens. Same thing with the flight model. It's okay to merge in this plane. Like, to think about it this way, you can merge in this plane now. It's not because it's good now, but it's because that's one of the aspects that it's, like, least bad at, because it's not good BVR, the radar is not good, the missiles that it carries are better, the R-27ER, or the R-27ER, the R-77 improvement plan is legitimately good. Like, I'm glad that they did it. You have the ability to do what I call counter launching, where if the guy's within 20 kilometers, you can shoot your missile and he has to react to it at a further distance now, which is good. Is it enough? No, not really. Not in Sim, at least. In RB, maybe it works out where, like, having a solid, like, 20 to 40% more missiles, like, scales out. I don't know. I haven't really paid attention to the statistics to really have a super informed opinion. I just know in SB, the way you play this plane is you deck rat as hard as possible, you stay out of sight, you try not to get engaged by more than one target, you try to counterfire, but you have to counterfire with the HMD because you can't rely on the radar itself to pick up locks. Can I do well in this? Yeah, obviously I'm coming back to base with an 11-2. Is this typical? No, hell no. Like, if you look across the board at, like, what me and Nimble Target do, it's basically around, like, a 2-to-1 KD, a little bit less, a little bit more. And the same games where we both suck in, and we want to leave because it's bad in a way that also feels bad.